But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
Phoenix! Dallas! Can hand me an apple, please? And a knife. Oh, yeah. You practicing the green dog or left foot? So it's strong and nice to practice.
Indeed.
They were coming off because you were getting 2 under or the 2 over.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fireside Chat, Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and I am here joined with a special guest that you probably heard talking through the intro.
You can hear that?
Yeah, we heard all of that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I swear I thought I pressed the mute button.
That's okay. Welcome to the show, Hotep Jesus. You are a 3-time tech startup founder, marketer, and author featured on Fox News, philosopher on the subject of culture, and your mission is to red pill people into independence. That is your little boilerplate intro. So my name is Brian. This is Honey Badger Radio. We talk about men's issues. I don't know if you know anything about Honey Badger Radio or men's rights activists. Do you know much about that? Yeah.
I know that Rollo Tomasi is he's designing my book cover.
Yeah.
Actually, it's already done. You know Rollo Tomasi?
Yeah, I never spoke to him though, because Rollo he's not an MRA, according to his own description.
What's an MRA?
That's what we are. We're men's rights activists. That's what we get called. We're more like, to be more specific, so we talk about men's rights in that there is a legal and political and in particular cultural, let's say, gap between what the attention we give to women's issues and what we give the attention we give to men's issues. So we talk about the issues facing men. Some of them are rights. For example, the right of bodily autonomy, as circumcision is not only legal, but it's regular practice all the time. And then there's an entire sort of subset of activists that deal with that. They call themselves intactivists, that talk about the issues of circumcision. That's just one issue, but we also talk a lot about fathers' rights, child custody, the family courts, divorce courts, false rape accusations, paternity fraud, wrongful paternity, and then there's more like, say, socio-cultural stuff, like the recognition of male sacrifice. We try to help men that are having suicidal feelings, and they struggle with mental health issues, single motherhood. I think it's the most important and most relevant topic of our times. But that is in a nutshell what MRAs talk about. Guys like Rollo, and I say this with no disrespect, but guys like Rollo are more interested in the more like relational stuff, like game and attracting women and understanding female nature and that kind of thing, which we also talk about as well.
Okay.
And so Honey Badger Radio is actually unique in that it is, even though I am a man and I run most of the shows, it's founded by women. And women, there are 3 women, Alison, Hannah, and Karen, and they have done extensive work on the subject of not just men's issues, but also the predominant cultural narrative of gender, which is feminism. That is essentially the way in which gender has to be spoken about by normal people is the feminist narrative, and we go against that. So
I like it.
Yeah. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk to a person like yourself because, I'm, for a little bit of information about me, I'm Puerto Rican. And I was born in, and I grew up in, and I still live in Chicago on the west side. And I've been around the worst parts of this city historically, right? And I've seen what happens in these urban communities as they deteriorate. They are destroyed by gang violence, by drugs, by crime, and all of that. And one of the things that I still currently, I live in the hood still, and I'm mainly around it's Black and Hispanic neighborhood that I live in, and I see the world in a way that other people that live around here wouldn't. In that I know what's actually eating these cultures, these neighborhoods from the inside out, and I think that feminism has a lot to do with it, if not the majority of what the problem is.
The feminist movement has done a number on the Black community. I remember the way my elders broke it down to me. I haven't, dove into the subject matter much of my own yet. I'm studying some other things like socialism and economics, but it kind of ties in, right? Because when
it absolutely ties in. Feminism is the tool by which you bring about socialism.
Yeah. So the incentive was, to qualify for WIC and some of these other mother support programs. It said that you had to kick the father out of the home. There could not be a man in the home in order for her to receive some of these benefits. Mm-hmm. She had that no man was living there. So it definitely, caused a rift. And then the other thing was, I believe it was on the subject of voting. But basically, the way they say it to me is the white woman had a problem with her man. The Black woman never had a problem with her man until feminism came around. Then all of a sudden, there was these fabricated problems between the man and woman in the home because the Black community is actually matriarchal. It's not patriarchal at all. It's matriarchal. When we talk about Sunday dinner, that's at grandma's house. Grandpa might have paid for it, but we call it grandma's house. It was grandma's Sunday dinner. Mm-hmm. Grandma handled, our relationship with the church. She handled a lot of things in the Black household. The father was really more or less just like the provider.
Yep. Let me ask you a question, because I want to get into this from let's call it a race angle in a little bit, but I want to learn a little bit more about who you are, and I know the audience wants to know more too, and what it is you represent. So you describe yourself as a Hotep. What is a Hotep? Let's clear the air. How does it compare or differentiate itself, this identity, this whatever you want to call it? How would you differ? First off, what is it, and how is it different from, say, Black Lives Matter or any other sort of Black identity group?
Yeah, so let me just first say that if you go to hotepnation.com and hit FAQ, you'll get a really detailed explanation of Hotep and what we stand for. So now let me explain it briefly. Right around the time that Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown were murdered by the police, and the subject of police brutality was in the air, Black Lives Matter, their approach was quite feminine in nature. It was like, hands up, don't shoot, and, stop killing us. It's very submissive. The quote unquote Hotep approach was more empowering, saying, well, if we had our own police academy, if we owned our own police precinct and it was Black cops policing Black people, then this problem, we can assume, would not happen, or if it did, it wouldn't be racially motivated. Our approach was about more like, well, if we had a stronger economic base, if we weren't so busy, or I should say so poor that we have to commit felonies or do things to feed our family, then we might not be in this situation. So our approach was more about independence. Now, when I spoke this message in response to how Black Lives Matter handled the situation, they were calling me Hotep. And I'm like, you can't be Hotep. Hotep means peace or satisfaction in ancient Metanetta. So I'm like, you can't be that, right? And they kept calling me that. So I was like, you know what? Because they're dragging our ancient ancestors' name through the dirt or term through the dirt, I said, let us grab this, let's exalt it and reclaim it and give it some honor. And that's what we did. So we formed Hotep Nation. My name is Hotep Jesus. We got Hotep Dubes, Hotep California, Hotep Cote d'Ivoire, Uncle Hotep, and it goes on. Mm-hmm. So that's where we are now. You know, we're focused on economics, having a strong economic base for the Black community, focused on finance, you know, stock market, crypto, Bitcoin, investing, so on and so forth.
So it sounds like you're kind of like saying that you're doing a kind of more masculine version of a response to these kind of these incidents with like Trayvon and Michael Brown and so on. But you're taking a more masculine approach to the response.
Yeah, to be more specific, you know, everybody's approach is usually like, you know, how do we fix the problem? Whereas our approach is how do we prevent the problem? You know, same thing with health. Everybody wants to know, you know, how do we cure cancer? And it's like, well, how do we prevent cancer? So they're two completely different things. So that's how we're looking at it.
Sure. Okay, fair enough. I asked because I've looked into Black Lives Matter, and we could get into, I guess, you know, the actual details of the quote unquote cases, these cases that have sort of spurred on the Black Lives Matter movement, which is the more mainstream, the more popular movement. I think that that's by design, and I'll tell you why. I'm assuming that you've looked into this, but I'm going to point it out for people that are watching anyway. If you go to the Black Lives Matter website and you try to figure out what they're about, you will find that Black Lives Matter is actually an intersectional feminist organization that is in every respect, it is a part of Antifa. And Antifa is it's not actually like a group. Antifa is more like a blanket term that several other activist groups fall under, but all of them want the same thing. They just use different kinds of class struggle narratives to create those ends, right? So, for example, what's the one that By Any Means Necessary is also an intersectional feminist organization that is part of Antifa. And the reason why I say that Black Lives Matter is a feminist organization is because they say so, but also this is the most disgusting part, and I think it should be. See, the reason why we at Honey Badger Radio don't talk about race, because we generally don't, is because we think that the problem really stems mostly from gender. Especially, I believe that. And I believe that as somebody who, you know, like I said, grew up in the hood, from what I've seen. When you take the father out of the home, then you destroy the family, because you make you put the mother in a position where she becomes a wife to the state, and she's getting whatever the state, you know, decides to give, which is often just enough to live, but not so much that they not so little that they want to go out and make their own money. These kids that they have are often raised, you know, without fathers in the home, which results in crime and high dropout rates for the boys and early pregnancy for the girls. Like literally it biologically alters them. So they actually, the women, the girls hit puberty earlier and they become sexually active earlier. And another unfortunate side effect of this is that because there is no family unit, the single mothers are more likely to just like have sex for pleasure, and they get pregnant by, you know, what you would consider to be the most alpha men in the neighborhood. But unfortunately, lots of other women are also having sex with those alpha men. And if they're doing so with, you know, just getting pregnant willy-nilly or whatever, then you're going to have a situation where the children of those women's children might meet each other without knowing that they're related, become attracted to each other and have sex, and you actually get accidental inbreeding as well. And so it's a really big problem that I believe stems from feminism. And to put a cork on the Black Lives Matter thing, if you look at the narratives coming out of Black Lives Matter, they are the reason why I know that they don't actually give a shit about not only black people, but especially black men, who are the people dying, by the way. You know, that it's black men that die that created Black Lives Matter and made it popular. But the reason why I know they don't care about them is because prominent figures within Black Lives Matter have already decided that black men are, and they've described it this way themselves, the white people of black people. So black men oppress women in the black community, even though, as you said, the black community is more matriarchal. And I would argue that most cultures are probably more matriarchal. They defer to the woman. I know that Latino cultures are like that. Jewish cultures are like that. Even like Middle Eastern cultures are like that. And so it's just, the narrative has been literally flipped on us and reversed, and we're being told the opposite while they're actually like destroying stuff from within itself, like within their own narratives. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I was one of the first people to, if not the first, to expose Black Lives Matter. I did it on a YouTube channel. Like I said, right around that time, Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin, all that stuff was going down, and I noticed something on the website. It said mothers, parents, and children. I'm like, wow, you didn't want to say fathers? Like, is that a problem to say that, children need fathers? And they've actually come out and said similar things and said children don't need fathers. Yeah. So when I saw that, it was a huge red flag for me.
Yeah, they erase men. And the thing is, too, the idea, the intersectional feminist organizations are not unusual, and they're not fringe. They're mainstream, and they affect everyone. The only thing is, about with the black community and the Latino community as well, they're the canary in the coal mine. They're going to be the ones we're the ones getting hit first and hardest. But trust me, white people aren't safe either. And so, like, it's going to affect everyone. It's that's the thing too, is it's not a racial issue in that its ultimate goal is going to be the destruction of the family regardless of race, because it always puts men as the oppressor in every group, no matter what the intersection is. So it's men are the enemy.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
And the reason for that is because we accept their framework, which brings me to something else I wanted to bring up. The reason why I got you on, actually, was because somebody tagged me in a tweet that they were responding to you, and they tagged me in the tweet. And your tweet was, this is what you said. You said, that what's funny about Twitter political debates, they're all controlled by the left. All of the right's talking points are in response to the left, thinky face. Abortion, gun control, immigration, etc. Sometimes I wonder if the right has any thoughts of its own. Do you remember that tweet?
I sure do.
Yeah. And somebody who follows me and watches this show tweeted at me and said, the right plays by the left's rules when they come to defend against them. That's why they continue to lose so heavily, or perhaps establishment conservatives just want a punching bag to rally against but never defeat. At Doge in Charge talks about it a lot. Yeah, and I've been trying to talk about this a lot lately because it's actually one of the hardest things to try to bring people's attention to. See, I think that the reason why the right keeps losing in the long run, like, they get little victories and people are like, oh, Ben Shapiro destroyed this guy with facts, reason, logic, and evidence. But the reason why they're destined to continue to only have small victories and never really win is that they accept the left's terms. So when they engage them in debate on their terms by accepting things that they haven't questioned yet, then they make sure that they never ultimately win. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I think that the right and the left are the same. So some people say the right and the left are two sides of the same coin. And I'm like, no, they're on the same side of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
The
now,
left.
When you say the right is on the same, are you talking about the average right-wing citizen? Or are you talking about politicians? Or are you talking about people in the media?
I'm glad you asked that, because let me specify, because that was a mistake on my behalf. So when I say left and right, I'm talking about establishment left and establishment right, or conservative Inc. and liberal Inc., right? Or DNC, RNC.
Uh-huh.
The everyday common person, it becomes a little bit more nuanced. It breaks down into maybe like 3 categories. So you have the person that wants to be like the wannabe pundit, right? They'll go along with the program. Useful idiot. You'll have the actual pundit who is almost part of, the Inc. or the establishment. They want to be down with the establishment. They're working hard to get there. Another useful idiot. And then you just have the idiot. And the idiot is someone who is following those 2 people above them, oblivious to the truth. And I feel bad for them. And then you have those who are, right or left. They may be more quote unquote woke than the rest and understand that something's wrong here, right? So I'm glad you asked me to specify that.
Yeah, because I've been thinking, and look, I think that the unfortunate thing is talking about things in terms of political talking points is actually a bit reductionist. It's actually kind of small compared to like the ideas I'm trying to talk about are much bigger. And that's the reason why people lose, because they keep engaging at the political level and they try to use the left's talking points against them, and they try to accept their terms in discussing these issues where they should be thinking about things even bigger than that. So when the left says, Republicans are racist and sexist and homophobic and xenophobic, etc., what most figures on the right do is they try to figure out the ways in which the left is actually, racist and sexist and all of that. Where I think that people should be asking, what do those terms even mean? And how can we look at these? Like, what does it mean to be sexist, for example? And this is something we've talked about on the show a lot. Whenever I hear the word sexist, the only way that it's used is that it is trying to say this thing that's sexist is harmful to women. Why is it unique to women? And if something can be sexist towards men, which is something that most people would not be able to accept, but if something that we call sexist can only apply to women, then how can we even use that term at all? Like, why does it have any validity? Right? And what does it even mean? And this goes back to what I was saying. See, the left and feminists, they have taken control of the language itself. They have actually redefined terms. They have made words mean shit that they haven't meant for years. They have changed the language, and they've also made it difficult for us to talk about language. For example, why is it the left believes that? Let me try to explain.
Can I interject really fast?
Go ahead.
All right, so I just looked up sexist, and it brought up sexism, and they describe here, it says sexism is prejudice or discrimination based upon a person's sex or gender, right? So yeah, prejudice is a word that means to prejudge. And yep. I believe that everyone's prejudiced because as soon as you see someone's face, you make judgments. It's something you can't control. The subconscious mind does that.
Right.
Discrimination is something that we can debate, right? So I'll give them that. Then it says sexism can affect anyone, but it systematically and primarily affects women and girls. Now that's where you see the agenda, right? When they say it, sexism primarily affects women and girls, because I don't know how you can say that, because you can't prove that. You can't measure that. You can't quantify it, because men are affected by sexism as well in many different ways. For example, in the marketing world, the PR world is usually completely dominated by women. Marketing has a lot of women that dominate. Mm-hmm. And for example, when you call customer service, they prefer a female voice over a male's voice because the female is superior in the art of coercion. So when we look at the last sentence here, it says it has been linked to stereotypes and gender roles. So let's break down stereotypes. Stereotypes are a very real thing, and stereotypes help us navigate our world safely. So stereotypes have a positive side to them. And then you say gender roles, right? So let's talk about that. Like, gender roles are a very real thing. And as soon as you remove gender roles, you disrupt the family unit. And to conclude, it says, and may include the belief that one sex or gender is intrinsically superior to another. And that is, in fact, true. One gender is superior in certain areas than the other.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is, uh, there's a natural balance that God created, and we're starting to slowly drift away from that. Or I should say quickly.
Absolutely. And like, let me ask you this. What's wrong with prejudice? We all do it. What's wrong with discrimination? We all do that too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to in this world.
Oh, well, like, do you have a kind of woman that you prefer to date?
So yeah, I think you got to choose your woman based upon your preference in socioeconomics and your political alignings. You know what you want to do with your money and where you want to go with your culture.
Yeah.
And after that is love and looks, and and goals and stuff like that. But if you guys aren't aligned at the bank account, and you're not aligned in the culture that you create in your home, for yourself and your children, there's going to be a rift. And I think a lot of people choose their mate based upon looks and based upon emotions, and they overlook the socioeconomic factors and political factors. I just had this happen with somebody I was speaking with recently, and they just had to move out of their boyfriend's house, or move out. They moved in together. And she had to move out because, the person that she thought she was dealing with isn't who it was. And their rift was at the cultural level.
Yeah. So we discriminate on that, and that's normal. There's nothing that's the thing. That's what I'm talking about with the language, the control over language. See, the left believes that discrimination is evil and they don't want people to discriminate. However, they discriminate, you discriminate, I discriminate every day.
Right.
Whenever you decide this is what I'm going to eat today, you've discriminated. Whenever you decide I want to get her phone number as opposed to this other person's phone number, you've just discriminated. They want to eliminate discrimination. It starts off at stuff that people find agreeable, like, yeah, you shouldn't treat people who don't look like you differently, whatever. And that's all like kind of common sense, but it breaks down. This is why you have like the body positive movement. This is why you have people saying, you should date trans women even if you're not into trans women. Because they find all levels of discrimination to be offensive. And they want to take away people's ability to choose, which is what discrimination is.
Yeah. Sometimes I believe it's not even about discrimination. I think what it is hurt people. And when you look at most of these feminists, right? So one of the feminists that attacked me was Jamila Lemieux, formerly of Ebony magazine. And when you go and look at her past, and this is no dig on her, much love to her. But when you look at her past, her husband left her mid-pregnancy and went and married another woman. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, hurt people. And I think that when you look at a lot of these people that are in this movement, they're undesirable, either physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. They're just undesirable people. So it's that resentment. It's that payback that they're looking for.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of them are fatherless. So it's that resentment of the male figure that they have. And that's why they say, in a black community, I don't need a man. Well, it's because you've grown up without a man. Therefore, you think you don't need one. Or I didn't have a father. As you seem to say, I don't need a father. Because you grew up without one, you think you don't need one. But children need them.
Did you have your father?
Oh, yeah. My father was a huge influence on my life. I think if I didn't have my dad, I honestly believe I'd probably be one of two places, either in the military, or probably some kind of drug dealer.
Mm-hmm. And where you grew up, if you don't mind me asking, was there a problem with fatherlessness, or was it like a lot healthier atmosphere, or what?
We can talk about my family, really. Mm-hmm. My family on my mom's side is, there's no fathers damn near, Uh-huh. They my mom grew up without a father, but it wasn't like he abandoned. He was killed in the war. You had some of them we lost to drugs, some of them we lost to the streets, some of them we lost to jail. We had a lot of that. I grew up in the suburbs, and the black kids in the suburbs, I want to say the majority had fathers. You had a number of them that didn't have fathers, but majority of them came from good homes, and we were talking about the suburbs here, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
majority of them were from stable homes.
On your podcasts and shows, I know you talk a lot about, you know, current events and news and stuff, but philosophically speaking, do you speak much about would you consider what we might consider to be men's issues on your show?
Oh yeah, we cover culture heavily, and you know, you see a lot of things coming down the pike. Like last night, we covered the Snapchat. One of the Snapchat filters said, "Love doesn't have an age," you know. So, and then, you know, that was all connected to Pride Month, and you know, so, you know, we talk about that, the attack on masculinity. You know, we have drag kids now. We said this was, you know, the people that we study, like Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, you know, she said that, you know, she said, you know, in the future, men are going to be wearing dresses. So, you know, we were made aware of this, you know, in the early 80s, 90s.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew this stuff was coming. So we talk about it. We highlight it to show people, like, look, Hotep's been told you.
Yeah. And so what are, in your mind, the most important, I guess, problems that you'd like to see fixed within the Black community?
I think the home, right?
Yeah, the family. And that means bringing fathers back. So how, what would you think would be a method by which we can bring fathers back into the home? Because I agree. And the thing is, it's not limited to the Black community. The Latino community have the same problem of fatherlessness. And they're this is the thing that's ironic. And I try to point this out. See, the reason why I think the political conversation is so difficult to have and is so reductionist is a lot of the terms are messed up. Again, I think by design. The left will tell you that right-wingers and conservatives are all of these terrible things, and that Black community and Latino community should never vote for them. But the weird thing is, Blacks and Latinos culturally are extremely conservative. Like, extremely. They believe in a natural order. They believe in a lot of conservative values if left to their own design, if the state doesn't get involved, right? They put family first when the opportunity presents itself, if you don't break it down artificially from the outside. And yet they always vote, when they do vote, they always vote for the left because the left has them voting for them. It's almost like it goes against their nature to do that. And this is the reason why I don't like conflating right wing with conservative, because I don't think those are the same at all.
Correct.
And I don't conflate liberal with leftist either, because those are absolutely not the same. There's nothing liberal about the left at all. So I try to be very clear, and this is why I was saying, because of their attack on language, because they've messed with the definitions of words.
Yeah, so we can blame the government all day. You know, of course, we want to get government out of the home. Mm-hmm. But what I think it is there has to be a new Bible, a new religion, a new culture that is established as far as how a family runs. So, for example, when we look at other communities, they have a rites of passage for the boys at a certain age. In normal communities in America, we have something called a Sweet 16. None of that exists for boys, right?
Yep.
So
communions used to be a thing too.
What's that?
Communion used to be a thing, in my culture anyway.
Yeah, I was raised Catholic, so I went to an confirmation. So that part is missing. But I think what it is the culture has to understand that the media that's provided to them is poison, and that extends from all parts of entertainment, including the news, Hollywood, and music. So we have to cut the media off from access to our household. You know, we have to cut off the cable. We have to stop buying the magazines. Magazines, you know, like Ebony Magazine has been pushing a feminist agenda, you know, Essence and all these different, you know, types of media. We have to disengage from the online media like The Root. that spread a poisonous message. Because that's what's attacking our minds. And as we're eliminating those pieces that deteriorate our home, we have to come up with a science or a ritual. For example, some of my friends just went through Ramadan, and so I understand a little bit about the Islamic life. And these guys pray, 5 times a day, I want to say. So that's part of a regimen. Now, I'm not saying you have to pray 5 times a day, but part of your regimen could be, what you eat. The Black community suffers from high blood pressure, hypertension, all of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, diabetes. So, yeah. So it's about understanding our ritual in our home. So first, let's drink water. Let's take in fruit first thing in the morning. Let's pray. Let's meditate. And I think a lot of our problems can be solved with just implementing that, because what we see is there's an emotional problem. When a man and a woman split, usually it's an emotional problem or a financial problem. A lot of times it's financial, but if you have emotional control, you can overcome those financial issues. We all have financial issues, but if you can have some emotional control, we can overcome those financial issues. There seems to be a lack of emotional intelligence in the home. So once we increase that emotional intelligence and we learn how to deal with our tempers, we can have better relationships.
Right. Okay. I want to add something to that, but let me read some super chats. If you guys want to send some super chats, if you tag me, I'm not going to read it. Send me a super chat though, and I will read it out. It could be a question for Hotep Jesus or just a comment. Zeranx gives us $10 and says, how does Hotep regard the Mike Brown and Tyshawn Lee cases? Are you familiar with the Guardian's The Counted page that covers nationwide police killings over the course of 2015 and 2016?
Yeah, what about them?
I guess he just asked how you regard them. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so when people ask questions, it's kind of like when people say, sometimes I'm online and they send me a tweet and it's like a headline of a newspaper and they go thoughts, or they send me a video and they go thoughts, and I'm like, good or bad. Like, that's the only 2 questions I'm going to give you, like bad, right? So that person asked the question, I'm just going to say bad. Right?
Okay.
Unless you get specific with the questioning, I can't answer it.
All right.
It's so broad.
Egregious Charles gives us $10 and says, loving this conversation, but I'd like to hear a little bit more from Hotep Jesus versus the guy I already agree with. Yeah, I know. I get wordy because I want to make sure you understand my position, but I can be a little bit wordy. So I want to comment real quick on what you were saying about the changes. I think that this is what I think, and I think it coincides with what you're saying, but I think it's actually more fundamental. I believe that what needs to happen is something of a paradigm shifting event, and that is we need to have more compassion and love for men, and we need to give women more respect and accountability. And when I say respect, I don't mean respect in the way that most women often demand, online or in person. They say, you need to respect me. No. Respect is earned, but we need to give them the opportunity to earn the respect and accountability, because we don't treat women like adults. We treat them like children. And that means we don't give them opportunity so if they're accountable for their actions, they will see that there is something to be gained from earning that respect. It's like, why do we have so much love for men that are responsible and accountable and honorable? Because those are admirable traits. Women don't often exhibit them because they're not asked to exhibit them. They're often given credit just for existing. So we need more compassion for men and more respect for women.
That's men's fault,
Yes, I agree. It is men's fault.
Women are terrible at apologizing and taking accountability, but I believe it's men's fault because we allowed it to get like that. We allowed them to get away with murder.
Absolutely.
We allowed them. Soy boys are ruining dating like terrible.
Well, not just soy boys though, just regular dudes, because they give women a pass for all kinds of things. But yeah, soy boys are especially bad, like male feminist types, because they worship women and they give them all the kudos for just existing. And this is the reason why if you're like a red pill dude and you're looking at women's behavior, there's almost nothing to admire because they've done nothing worthy of admiration. And it's difficult because you know that they're capable, the potential is there, right? But we don't treat them as adults.
Yeah. We have to start putting our foot down. So, for example, a woman will save a guy in the phone as his name will be food. And it's just like, she knows whenever she's hungry, she's like, oh, you want to go on a date? He just takes it and goes get some food, but she's only using them for food.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is on the subject of money. Like when you're dating a girl, at what point do you at least make her pay for a date? Even if it's coffee or lunch, at some point you got to make her come out of pocket just to see her character. I'm covering this in my book, but if a woman never offers to buy anything for you or to pay for something, or she's just real at ease with you paying for things, that's a red flag. So
absolutely.
I remember one time I was at the movies with this girl, right, and I was broke as hell at the time, and so we sit down in the movie theater. She's super high maintenance. She's used to dealing with NBA ball players, but I got charisma, so I bagged her. So we're in the theater and whatnot, and she goes, "You're not gonna buy any popcorn?" Right? So I'm like, in my head, I'm like, no, like I never buy popcorn. It's like overpriced or whatever. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna buy popcorn, right? So I know with popcorn, you're gonna need something to drink that down with, right?
Uh-huh.
So I go to the desk and I purposely don't get a drink. I come back, I hand her the popcorn. She starts eating it. She's like, "You're not gonna get a drink?" I looked at her, and then I looked back at the screen and sat there. I ain't say nothing. But that's you got to teach these women a lesson. Like, I'm not the one.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you give them, and that's just a little thing, right? That's just a little thing. In the grand scheme, we're talking about, women, how they raise their children, how they choose their men. Because, the way that everything exists now, I don't know if you noticed, but not just in the mainstream media, but just in general conversations, on social media, in person, politically, whatever, things just happen to women. Nothing that they do is of their own making. They never had like a choice. It's all stuff that just happens to them, and men are always doing things to women. This is the narrative that feminism puts forward. This is why you have single mothers where there are fathers that are not around. Sometimes it's because they're in jail. Sometimes it's because the women didn't tell them that they had a kid, or they've made steps to make sure that the father's not in the picture. And sometimes it's because the father, is a deadbeat and he didn't want to take care of those kids. But at no point do we say, "Why did you sleep with him?" Like, at no point does anyone say, "What were you thinking?" Right? And that's a taboo thing to say, because feminists have created a lot of anxiety around blaming women for shit that they're responsible for.
Yeah, what I always say is, if you get knocked up by a deadbeat, that's poor vagina management.
Mm-hmm.
And if a man knocks up a woman who gets an abortion and he's against abortions, or knocks up a woman and when they break up she puts him on child support, that's poor penis management.
Yes, although I think that you can make a case for, fathers' rights, that like, if we're gonna have abortion be a thing, I think biological fathers that want sons or daughters, they should be in the conversation. I'm not saying that they should have control, but I think they should be a part of the dialogue. And right now they're not at all, and they have no choice.
Yeah.
So it's like and there are many cases of women who, trick men into impregnating them. They lie about being on the pill. They put punch holes in the condom and impregnate themselves because they want that. They want that. That check from the man, and also they're gonna get money from the state. It's the state. The state basically, through custody and child support, and also the welfare state itself, they don't just reinforce this behavior, they encourage it in women.
Yeah There's some women make a career out of getting knocked up by rich men.
Absolutely.
And they'll have babies by multiple rappers.
Yeah, I knew a girl that I worked with. It was she was a good friend of mine. I thought she was really sweet, you know, black girl, and she had like 2 kids, and she was working at we worked this little like retail job, and she was like having kids, but she was having kids under the condition that it was going to increase her tax return. So she was like, oh, if I have 3 kids, I'm going to get this much money back. I guess I'm going to have another kid. I'm like, what?
Yeah, a lot of that.
Absolutely, it happens a lot. This is like a real thing. Okay, so Zeranx, the guy who sent that super chat from before, he expanded on his question. He says, expanding on questions in super chats is expensive. Mike Brown gets a lot of coverage, or he did. I mean, they don't talk about him anymore. While 9-year-old Tyshawn Lee was executed by rival gang members to his father. How does Hotep, if they come together around the Mike Brown issue, reconcile the lack of anything said regarding Tyshawn Lee, since I've heard nothing?
It doesn't fit the agenda. It doesn't fit the agenda. That's a better way to ask the question. It doesn't fit the leftist agenda. The leftist agenda is designed to divide, or the agenda period is designed to divide. We have to create a rift, a racial rift. And as long as they can create a racial rift, they can stay in control and they can keep us plugged into their system that is supposed to be providing solutions. We're always dependent upon them. When you talk about black on black crime, there's nothing to be had there as far as division is concerned. They can't create a divisive take on that. And then the rebuttal on that, they've sat down in think tanks and came up with rebuttals as to why that's irrelevant. You know, they'll say, well, you know, there's why nobody brings up white on white crime. You know, crime is committed within, you know, the proximity of where you live, you know, and all that stuff, which is, you know, it seems like a really great argument, but it doesn't change the fact that this stuff isn't being talked about. You know, like fine, yeah, crimes are committed within the proximity of your race, that, you know, your neighborhood, but Tyshawn Lee was murdered and nobody's talking about it. Nobody wants to talk about black on black crime. And if you bring it up, you know, as a white person, they'll call you racist. If I bring it up, they're trying to say that I'm pandering to the right or something like that.
Sure.
So it just doesn't fit the agenda.
Yeah, but you know what? When they say that, don't let that affect, because that's another method of shutting people down. They say, oh, you're just, you know, Uncle Tom, or you're just repeating what the right says. So that doesn't mean it's wrong. I'm just putting that out there. But I have another super chat here. Miles Kinslow gives us $10 and says, great point, Brian, on single mothers. People have a duty to choose stable relationships. My body, my choice, your responsibility. All right, so I just want to make a real quick comment. I live in Chicago, and not too far, like maybe like 5 miles from where I live, is like the most violent neighborhood in the city. And there are kids that die like every weekend that are killed by other black kids that are killed by other blacks every weekend. Nobody talks about it. And it is because it's not convenient, but it's also probably because you couldn't even keep up with the conversation. And it's really hard to convict anyone, because there is this saying in the hood is snitches get stitches, right? So there is it's like people protecting criminals in their neighborhood from foreigners, you could say, from the outside, which are the cops. And part of it has to do with the narrative of that they should feel threatened by white people, by the government, by the police, etc. So it makes it even more difficult for people to be held responsible for what they do, or held accountable.
Well,
you know, by the law.
When you look at Baltimore, I forget what documentary it was. It might have been like Narcos or something like that on Netflix. And one of the criminals said, the best thing that happened was that high-profile case that happened in Baltimore. I can't remember the name. I don't keep black struggles, stuff in my head. But there was a high-profile case of police brutality in Baltimore within the last, I want to say, 3 years. I think some black cops actually were involved.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. There was a black female cop that was actually she was the highest ranking officer. I mean, it's a Democrat-run city with a black mayor and black commissioner and all that. Yeah, Freddie Gray.
Right. So on the heels of that incident, it turned out to be like a hands-off approach with them, patrolling certain neighborhoods. And the criminal said, like, the best thing that happened was that high profile case, because now the cops don't even come down here. I can sell drugs all day long.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, for sure. It's a useful distraction. And also, again, the political correctness is another way to keep people from talking about the truth, or at least exploring ideas, So, all right. Well, one other thing I wanted to ask you. What is a white person? How do you define that?
A white person. Well, if we go by, there's two ways to define this, right? You have the ancient term, and then you have the legal term. So let's do ancient first, right? So at one point, we had a white Aryan race, and white Aryan race, Aryan is Sanskrit for noble. So when we talked about white, it actually had nothing to do with skin color. White was more or less of exaltation and about purity and being noble, right? So let's leave that, right? That's what white meant. Now, when we look at white as a legal term, white means free, and that's according to several documents. And legislation passed. I think one of them, South Carolina. And you can look this stuff in conjunction with the black codes that the Dixiecrats put together. But white is a free person. And again, it doesn't have anything to do with skin color, because if you look at the 90s, one or some of the Arab nations, basically lobby to have Arab people considered as white when they come here. So technically, when you see an Arab in America, they're technically white by law.
Mm-hmm. And so the way that people typically use a term in common parlance, without looking at its history and its, however it's been used in the ways that you suggested, white typically means essentially if you have European features and you have like a skin color that's higher than a certain amount, or they might just say Caucasian instead. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was talking about this on my stream, on my own channel yesterday, because I think there's something interesting here. I think that the conversations around racial identity, no matter where you are on this spectrum, has been immensely distorted, and I don't think it's as important as the gender discussion. I actually think it's a bit of a distraction, because I think that the stuff with gender is going to be more harmful to everybody in the long run, and the stuff about race is just a distraction.
I like that. I like that take. I really, really like that take. I want to sit on it and think about it over the weekend. Mm-hmm. But at first listen, sounds like a really good take, bro.
All right. Well, I appreciate that you like that. So we got to wrap up in a bit because we've already gone for about an hour. Although I will go a little bit over because we started a little bit late. I want to expand on it a little bit more, and I'm trying to give it to you from the way in which the intersectional feminist narrative works. So let's establish a couple things about this, okay? Intersectional feminism is born from human beings, our natural inclination to protect women. If we didn't have that, and we've always had that, so like this idea that women were ever oppressed, it's a lie. They never were. The only thing is, and there's a whole other set of conversations we could have in the future if you want to, it was just that what women found to be the best for them was not freedom, it was security. They felt free when they felt safe, and that's how they still are, okay? When they feel safe, that means that they're less free, but they're okay with that because they want to be safe. And the people they need to protect them so that they feel safe are men. And that's the way it's always been. This is why men are disposable. This is why they die in all the wars. This is why they kill themselves working in the fields, building society, and so on. And they do so happily because they do it for women. Because ultimately, we're all kind of, we've evolved over thousands and thousands of years to behave this way. So this is not something socialized. This is in our nature. For the most part. I mean, there might be a social aspect to it, but for the most part. And this is across the board, no matter what color you are, no matter where you are in the world, you'll find that men will protect their women and women will want them to do so or expect it from them, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what point in history. Okay? So that is just the truth about human beings. Now, what the leftist feminist narrative is an effort to use our inclination to protect women against us. And they do so by saying, you're actually really bad to women. You're actually cruel to them. You oppress them. You do all these things. And they bring up a bunch of bullshit statistics like rape culture statistics, like the wage gap, like, you know, men are in all the most powerful positions of government. They run all the Fortune 500 companies, etc. And they do so without, you know, taking into account that, you know, people in government are actually supposed to be serving us, so they don't rule over us. And the idea that you think that they are is kind of fucking terrifying, because it means that's what you want to do. And the people who, you know, own the big companies, they may be there through a tremendous hard work and probably some level of autism, but then there are a whole shit ton of men at the very bottom that no one's looking at. All the homeless men, you know, of which there is a massive majority. And this is because the leftist narrative looks at the world that way. You know, they only see things in terms of who's got more than me and how can I take it from them. So this is the thing I want to leave you with. I'm just pointing this out. They have created, through their manipulation of language, two standard narratives that I find really interesting. One, they've taken race and they have the idea of race and they have twisted it out of control to where if you really look at it, it doesn't make any sense. And I'll give you a couple of examples. According to racial activists, Latinos are a race, Mexicans are a race, Arabs are a race, Muslims are a race, the Jews are a race, white people, black people, and Asians. But if you really look at it, none of it makes sense because some of it relates to not races, but cultures. Some of it relates to nations, not races. And you have to like really get to the nuts and bolts of what a race is. It's actually a very short list. There are like racial phenotypes, and then those get sort of broken down. So, for example, a Chinese person is supposed to be upset if you mistake them for Korean and they consider that to be racist, even though that doesn't make any sense because I would think that a Chinese person is not a race, they're a nationality, you see? So it gets really mixed up. But the left is very clear in defining those lines. So they say this is where these things are, but they make it confusing enough, kind of like the Tower of Babel, that it's hard for us to talk about. And that's by design. And they do this other thing where they take white people specifically and they lump all of them together in one box. And everybody else, so the way that they create the narrative around race is there's white people and then there's everybody else. And so within, for example, within, let's say Far East Asians, there are Indonesians and there are Thai people and there are Filipinos and there are Chinese and there are Japanese and there's Korean and so on. And we can see that those are distinct things that we're supposed to respect as distinct. But when it comes to white people, even though there are Irish and Scottish and English and Norwegian and Swedish and Swiss and French and German and Italian and Spanish, we have to treat those as all the same, especially if they just look similar enough. And sometimes the Jews get mixed up in there too, but that's a whole other conversation. So they're very clear and distinct in how this should be divided up. Yet, when it comes to gender, that is completely malleable. There is no such thing as gender. Men and women are completely interchangeable, and there's an infinite amount of variety in between. And so this, to me, is by design. When you divide people by race, you make it very easy for us to see the other when there's a voice whispering in your ear that that guy doesn't look like you. And it's because he hates you or whatever the narrative is to divide us against each other. But when it comes to gender, they want to erase men as much as possible. So they say, well, you know, anybody could be a man if they want to be. And women could be men too. And women can act like men. And so what is masculinity? And that's why they define masculinity as toxic. And you can see that with the APA guidelines. But they don't, but anything positive about masculinity isn't inherently masculine. It's something that women can also do. So why would you blur the lines on gender when those lines are biologically clear, and yet you would draw distinct lines between people in terms of race when it's obvious that those lines are not clear?
Yeah. So the idea of race, of gender, as they're starting to create more of them, is just another divisive tactic. You take the two genders and then you start dividing them, and so it's really just a divisive tactic to create more division, more war, more money.
Yeah. And the only way that gender is divided, though, is in relationship to men. It's always away from men. You ever notice that? Like, how many instances are there that you've seen in the media of girls that are dressing up as boys and they're like parading that around? How many drag kings are there that are like little kids? How many, do you realize that there's I think 70%, this is like that we know of, 75% of people who transition are men that transition to women. Why do so many men want to be women? Why do so many men identify as women and then go into sports? How come women don't do that? Because the whole thing is divided away from women. I mean, away from men. I'm sorry.
Well, it's female privilege. So, it's easier to live life as a woman, or at least that's what these men believe. So, because usually, the red carpet is rolled out for women. We pay for their stuff, we open the doors for them, and then on the topic of sports, you see the new NCAA trans person, and they're kicking all the girls' butts, right, on the track. So, it makes life easier for them. It's an escape at some point. I know some people in the fashion industry and entertainment industry who have come out and told me, like, I can't expose who, but I have friends who pretend to be homosexual to advance their career.
Wow.
So, but I've also brought that up too, where I've said in the past, I think it's quite sexist that all of the people who transition into a woman get all the shine and all the light, but the ones that transition to men, it's just like, where's their bravery? When they come out, like, where's their cover?
The only time, the only time they do get paraded out is when it comes to like a discussion around the military. They use like, oh, this is a trans soldier, like she's a hero, or he's a hero.
Or when they get pregnant.
Yeah, or when they try to tell you not only women get pregnant, yeah, exactly. But I don't know. It's just a really interesting thought I'm having. I guess the last thing I wanted to ask you is, why is it there are so many Black Lives Matter people and like pro-black kind of black socialist types that are mulatto? Why is that? Do you know? Ever notice that? You never noticed that? Like Colin Kaepernick is mixed, and I knew a dude that was mixed, and they're all like, like these kind of far left black activist types.
Yeah, so some people would speculate that it's they're trying to compensate for what they lack in melanin and skin color. So, they're trying to make up for that, because they hate their white side, and they don't want to identify with it. So to compensate with the fact that they have a white side, they go extreme black with, all of their actions to kind of get away from that.
Yeah, I think that there's that. And I also think, because I lived in, when I was in high school, my high school was like 2 blocks away, literally 2 blocks away from Cabrini Green in the 1980s. And in the 1980s and 70s, Cabrini Green, which was a project in Chicago, it was the most violent project in the city. It was like the one that they featured in the Good Times TV show. That was Cabrini Green. It was bad. And I knew a girl that was mixed. I'll never forget her. Her name was Tasha, and she was adorable to me. I had a huge crush on her. And but she hated the fact that she was mixed. She was terrified that people would figure it out. And when they did, she got bullied relentlessly by the black kids there. And sometimes I think it's because there is a bit of, I don't want to say force, perhaps, I guess force, for lack of a better term, that comes from within the black community about the black identity. And I think that mixed people, they struggle with that because there are blacks telling them that they're not black enough, and they feel like that's something that they have to value, and it does sort of result in them kind of overcompensating, because there's a lot of policing that goes on within the black community about blackness. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why you get code switching.
Yeah,
You know?
I code switch all the time.
Yeah. And you know, I have a friend who did that too, and I always ask him, like, why are you doing this? You know, like, because it makes me wonder who you really are to me. I'd rather you just be who you're comfortable in, but it's one thing to ask, and another thing to, you know.
It's so for myself, the code switch isn't a personality switch. It isn't an ideology switch. Mm-hmm. It's an NLP tactic, and we do it subconsciously. We in the art of persuasion, you always want to speak to your audience in a manner that they're comfortable. So when I'm around certain people, you know, let's say black people, I speak completely differently. I speak in our native tongue, so to speak, right? Some people might call it Ebonics or whatever. And that's how we're comfortable speaking. Now, if I were to come to your show and I spoke like that, your audience wouldn't understand a thing I said, right? The other thing is when I use, you know, language that is of the, you know, hip hop variety, the white community sometimes is so pretentious that they'll confuse that with lack of intelligence. And I've even had some people say, you know, why are you talking like that on your stream? You know, you're more intelligent than that. So they want you to, you know, be this articulate person when addressing them. So, you know, that's part of the reason as well. You know, when I go on Fox News, I speak a certain way because I want people to perceive me in a certain way. If I talk as if I'm hip hop, a lot of people, especially white people, will write me off and say, oh, he's just an ignorant Negro. I remember my family growing up, if we saw somebody get on TV and they couldn't speak the vernacular of the Caucasian, you know, we wrote them off as ignorant. You know, we used to always say, like, you know, Magic Johnson can't speak. You know, he's not an articulate person. He's gotten better over the years from being on TV. You know, he's got a coach and all of that. But, you know, these people aren't that articulate. So, you know, that is an aspect of it all. But for me, a lot of times it's what we're talking about. That subject matter always changes my code. So if we're talking about hip hop, or, you know, or something in the black realm, then my vernacular changes. If we're talking about business, even if I'm talking to black people, if I start talking about business to black people, I my code switches. My accent changes and I'm more articulate because I have to use a larger vocabulary of words to teach them or to have this conversation with them.
Sure.
And it might be a blend of the two. It might be a blend of hip hop and Silicon Valley all in one, just so I can relate to them and relay the information in a way that they understand. Because sometimes I use words that they've never heard. You know, you can have a lawyer, you know, get up and start teaching, and the words he uses, you think you know what they mean, but in law, they mean something completely different. The same thing in finance, the same thing in startups, the same thing in banking. You know, these words don't mean the same in every different lane or market, you know?
All right. That makes sense. I don't think that was what was going on with people I know, but in your case, I could understand that. I think it was, from what I can tell, that it was probably subconscious, but I think there was some kind of desire to fit in with whatever group they were interacting with at the time. And, you know, I would always say, well, just talk the way you talk. Because, I mean, I talk the way I do, not because I'm trying to change like I'm Puerto Rican, but I never learned Spanish because my parents didn't really, like, you know, I was like raised by a lot of caregivers, babysitters and stuff.
It's not that they want to fit in. They have a fear of not fitting in.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like that, it's like that. Yes. And that it's going to come from from their fellow blacks and be like, why do you sound like a white person?
Yeah, I mean, I'm that, you know, but like, and when I grew up, you know, like I said, I came from Newark and then I moved to the suburbs. Yeah, I dealt with racism, you know, they treated me different, because of the color of my skin. But if you spoke a certain way, you had this fear of not fitting in, and you already don't fit in, So being the only black kid, it's like you kind of like you don't want to do something that's going to cause you to not fit in.
Mm-hmm.
It's very scary.
Yeah, I hear you. I understand that. All right. Well, did you have fun?
I did.
All right.
Great
cool.
conversation.
I'm glad. I hope that I left you some things to think about.
Yeah, I just want to say I have a book on masculinity coming out. Like I said, Rollo Tomasi did the cover. It's designed to. It's not a pickup artist book or anything like that. It's not a men's right activist book. It's designed to make the relationships between men and women better, and show and really put all the onus on men, like what men can do to make a woman act right, to create a balance within this gender ecosystem. And people can go ahead, and it's free. You can go and subscribe at Women Decoded, womendecoded.substack.com, womendecoded.substack.com, and go ahead and get on the wait list, and you'll be able to get on the wait list to get the pre-order at the discount price. After the first 24 to 48 hours, it's going to go to regular price.
Okay. Well, it sounds like a men's issues book to me. I mean, like, I don't think that it's not relevant, because I think that the thing is about men's rights. I want to say that I don't like that we call it men's rights, but feminists kind of named us. They called us men's rights activists because they were trying to make fun of us, and we just kind of, okay, fine, whatever, call us whatever you want. But ultimately, the problems we're solving, there are some legal rights, but if we don't address the cultural issues between men and women, the rights aren't going to matter. Because we have to fix what's wrong with men and women, like our relationship with each other, right? And that's really what's in danger, because the legal stuff doesn't matter if you can't fix the social habits. And I think that a book like that could be entirely useful. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Hotep Jesus, for coming on. And I hope you guys enjoyed us on this Fireside Chat. Please subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. Leave us a comment and hit that like button so that other people know that this happened and they can watch it themselves. I put all the contact info that I had available for Hotep Jesus. I got your YouTube channel, your Twitter, and your website, hotepnation.com. Is that acceptable? Should
Yes,
I put
sir.
something else? All right, sounds good. All right, man. Well, would you, if I wanted to have you back on again, would you come back on?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Well, why don't we revisit this topic once you've given what we had talked about some thought, and maybe we can, like, because I'm always down for like sharpening, let's say, sharpening my mind on these ideas. With all this division going on, I think that these conversations are absolutely crucial, and I'd like to continue to have them in good faith.
Yeah, let's do it after I do Joe Rogan.
All right. Oh, cool. Be sure to name drop Honey Badger Radio while you're on there. All right, man. I'll talk to you later, sir. And thank you guys for coming, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody.